Hey, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's our host for this week, Brent Aiken. Hey guys, welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brent Aiken, and I am here today with Josh Griffin. Now, if you've been around youth ministry for any given time, you probably know Josh, or at least know his name. Josh has been around youth ministry for a long time, but man, I don't want to steal your thunder. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about what you've done, what you're into right now, and everything in between.
Oh, very cool. Well, hey, it's great to be with you today. My name is Josh, and I've done youth ministry for a long time. Just means I'm old is all that means. I've served in 3 churches now, a rural farm church in Michigan, a large suburban mega church out here, Saddleback Church in California. And I'm currently the junior high pastor at a church here called Mariners, and absolutely love youth ministry. It is what I have given my life to. So I'm a dad, got 4 kids, and run a company called Download Youth Ministry as well, which I hope is something you know about. If not, it will change your life tomorrow.
It will.
Yeah, just everything, every week you got the grind of like, I got a program, I need a game, I got to find a talk or whatever. And the simple pitch was, could we create something where you get mega church resources for like $3 or $4 instead of hundreds of dollars, or we could never do that at our church. Is it possible to get a killer game for $3 or $4 or whatever? And it has turned into something way beyond what we ever dreamed. And we just want to help youth workers with what they need for tonight. And so on Wednesday, the Download Youth Ministry servers are burning up because everyone's literally downloading what they need for the night. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. And now we can talk about it at the end as well. But as you said, y'all have resources, but y'all have a bunch of other stuff now too. You have you have your DYM membership, of course. You have the Sidekick app for like games on the screens, which we use in our youth ministry. We love it. Boxes
Terrific.
Is like hands down the best thing ever.
Great. And there's more coming for the Sidekick app soon too. So stay tuned. It's been a while since we've added some new stuff, and there's some things brewing.
Yeah, but then you and Doug also do a podcast for the members, and there's all kinds of stuff. And the cool thing, if you don't know about Download Youth Ministries, it's legitimately $20, and you get 25, you get access to the Sidekick app, and you get like 7 or 8 free resources every month. You get exclusive podcasts for members, all kinds of crazy cool stuff. We've been members for a really long time. We love Josh and Doug. And so it was definitely one of those things when we started the podcast, we were like, Josh and Doug is a pipe dream kind of thing. And then nowadays it's like, oh, well, yeah, no, maybe we can make this happen. So
dude, I'm glad we made it happen. I'm honored to be on the show. And we got a few things cooking. We've got ymuniversity.com to help volunteers get training. We're about to launch some other fun new projects too. We do an event called DYM 100 every year, which is just, we invite out 100 people to our church and we talk youth ministry. It's a total blast. We've helped with all the, national conferences and training events, and COVID has thrown everybody for a loop. And so it's fun to be kind of on the way out of all of that and back to gathering again. And honestly, I'm a youth pastor, so I'm also writing my message for this weekend on Ephesians 1, by the way. And I'm helping junior hires be pointed to Jesus. I'm running camp. So I'm trying to not just be the guy that like helps youth pastors, although I love that. I'm a youth pastor, and that's what Download Youth Ministry is based on too. So I'm also using DYM stuff every week. Youth pastors are endlessly creative. It's so fun. And honestly, even you're using your gifts too for the podcast, which is awesome. So love it.
Yeah. We've loved it. We always say that this brings us more joy than we could ever imagine it brings to the people that are listening. And it's been an encouraging thing for us just as much as hopefully the listeners. So we've enjoyed it
Exactly.
as well.
Well, you know how it is when someone signs up in youth ministry or to volunteer, they think it's about helping the next generation, and they have no idea it's going to change them.
right?
Like we have
Yeah.
an 80-plus-year-old volunteer in our youth ministry. And she said, when we were talking about this, she said, I got more than I gave. And that's like an unbelievable statement because she was a great volunteer
Sure.
and served faithfully and was all about giving. And her takeaway was, no, I received way more than I ever gave out. And so that's the beauty of youth ministry, is that they think they're doing youth ministry, and they are, but God's also shaping them in it as well.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear that you're picking up a lot as you run the podcast too. That's so fun.
Yeah, it's been exciting, man. Especially it's always crazy, and I'm sure you can kind of relate with this as well. It seems like, I mean, 5 years goes by, 10 years goes by, and you keep having this kind of mindset of like, oh, well, I'm getting to the point to where I'm experienced now, and then something new pops up and you're like, I've never even heard of that. That's amazing. Like, and so it's just a constant finding of new ideas, new ways to approach the same message, the same story. It's awesome. But yeah, and I love it. I love what you guys do. I love that y'all have helped youth pastors for so long. And I love the mindset that you're like, I still have skin in the game. Like, I'm not just like me sitting up in the high executive like suite or anything like that. Like, you're still on the ground. You're still doing ministry.
Yeah,
And that's awesome.
I think I've actually gone backwards in my career. Technically, like I think I'm a junior high pastor now, and I'm the oldest and most experienced I've ever been. But I would argue that junior high ministry is the most fun I've ever had in my life. And junior hires need Jesus. I mean, having raised 4 teenagers, they're all out of junior high and in high school or beyond now. I also am seeing how important that age group is. Like, I'm giving my life to youth ministry. So
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to be in it and love my church. So I've got great people and great volunteers and am in the thick of it, man. So juggling all these things is a little bit of work, that's for sure. I'll admit that, but I wouldn't want it any other way.
Well, yeah. Well, and I think that tangents into our topic today very, very well. If there is so much to juggle, and the topic that we kind of chose for today was your first few years in youth ministry. And that's something that you have definitely done your fair share of discussion on with you and Doug as well. But so what is the importance of starting out strong as a beginner in youth ministry? Like you said, there's so many hats, so many things to juggle. What's the importance of starting off strong?
Yeah, well, the reality of it is that there's a widely accepted statistic that youth workers are going to last somewhere around 16 to 18 months. Now, we've tried to figure out exactly where that statistic came from, but nobody's fighting it. And to be honest, I've seen it over and over and over again. I mean, I've been in youth ministry. I'm closing in on 30 years, which is insane. But I've just seen way too much turnover. Even in Download Youth Ministry and Youth Ministry University, it's like this perpetual motion of it's more new youth workers and turnover and burnout and quitting and moving on to other great positions in ministry too. And I'm all for that too. But there's definitely a realization that youth workers are not staying a long time in their position. I think there's a million factors for that. But one of the biggest ones is they make some really common mistakes in their first 18 months. In addition to, the honeymoon period is over and you get into the real world of church ministry, and it might be too rude of an awakening. And you're like, whoa, I did not sign up for this. And they bail, or they do it all themselves and they don't have any volunteer support and they're burned out and they're done. Or they were just using youth ministry as a stepping stone for their career, or they flame out, burn out, whatever. So we've got to concentrate on the first year or first few years of youth ministry to help people avoid those common mistakes, learn well, build a great team, and make change a little more slowly than they would like, navigate the politics of a church, and be prepared. Like the first few years, months even, set the foundation for the whole thing. So my buddy Doug Fields, who literally wrote the book First Few Years in Youth Ministry. So you want to go on Amazon, it'll probably be there by the time this podcast is delivered. It'll be at your house. Yeah, I would say, man, read that book, dive in. We're launching a podcast to try to help people. We got a video course coming soon. Like, this first few years is really important to us because we've seen too much turnover, and the answers, they're really important, but they're not complicated. And if we get it right in the first few years, then you're going to be around at the 10-year mark. And instead of me being like the old guy in youth ministry at 50, there'll be a ton of people that have done youth ministry a long time. You know, one of my goals as part of my career is to help youth ministry careers be measured in, instead of in months, in years, or instead of in years, maybe in decades. And that's just not our profession, our calling right now. And so you got to start right, or it's going to be an uphill battle for the rest of your career. It's hugely important. It's the thing.
Yeah, well, and I totally agree with it. I've read first 2 years in youth ministry. Every intern, every associate that I have that has any inclination of being in youth ministry, like that is the book that we go through. And you can't see it on camera, but like to the side, I typed out the top 10 youth ministry commitments. And that the thing about the first 2 years that I love, and it's almost like it. I always joke that it's a misleading title because it's more like a every 2 years in youth ministry book.
Yep.
Like, it's not something that just needs to be read the first 2 years that you're in the game. It needs to be something that you reconnect with every 2 years.
Exactly. Well, and Download Youth Ministry is launching a conference this October. It's the first few years in youth ministry conference. And people are so great. They're like, I'm not in my first few years, but I need this. Can I come back? We're like, no. It's for people that are in their first few years. They're like, you don't understand. I got to go because I need to go back to the basics. And I do think it is something that we need to revisit pretty regularly. Like, this is the nuts and bolts of youth ministry and starting out right. We'll figure out how to expand the audience from a little conference we want to do with just newbies. But the reality of it is that I'm almost 30 years into this. I still need to return to the first few years, and I still need to remember those commitments. And so the idea with some of the stuff we're launching soon is to help youth workers through a podcast, through some video courses, through this training event, to help them, to guide them well through the common mistakes and pitfalls of the first few years. So, and I made them too. So I can also teach very well from my own experience of making mistakes and failures and ticking off the wrong people and making change too fast and emphasizing the wrong things and doing youth ministry alone instead of building a team. Like, you name the mistake, I made it. So I have some credibility, not because I'm any good, but because I've goofed up a lot.
Yeah. Mistakes make better marks, I guess. I don't know. Mistakes make correction. And so, yeah, that's awesome. And I totally agree. It's something that even 12 years in, I look back, like I said, I mean, they're plaqued on my wall. And it's one of those things that it's like, you know, we're thinking about starting this new thing. And like, I look over and I'm like, all right, man, I don't know if that fits with these. And so it's like, it's a constant reference for me. And it's something that I really, really try to build my whole mindset off of. And I think it's important, and I might even mention those later in this conversation, just for the sake of they are, especially for first few years with this conversation. I think they're super important. But how can we effectively work to build our ministry if we're learning the ropes? So like, say you're the new guy, you're like fresh, like you said, that honeymoon phase where like you're everybody's best friend, you do no wrong happens. Like, how do you build a ministry while you're learning the ropes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is just the reality of how it's going to be. You're going to start your first year in youth ministry, and there's two tracks. One is the track you're on, where you need to learn and grow and be developed as a leader. You need to be getting as much education and training, books, podcasts, pile it on, pile it in. That's one track. At the same time, there's another track of your ministry and helping reach kids for Jesus and get them connected into the church and growing on their own, like, and serving somewhere. Like, there's two tracks. And I think oftentimes what happens is youth workers in their first few years, they jump in really hard into the church, and then they don't develop themselves. And so they don't have a mentor to bounce something off, or a coach or a trainer, whatever. They're not spending the time developing their own gifts and getting their questions asked. Like we're eager to like prepare a talk, but you might need to listen to a podcast to help your skills too. You're like, I want to like get my kids discipled, but your discipleship is lacking in your training on how to do youth ministry. So I would say, the first thing is the attitude of a learner. Like if you want to succeed in youth ministry beyond the first 2 years, you've got to be a learner. So you got to be hungry to learn, develop, grow, exercise, be trained. You've got to humble yourself enough to have a mentor and coach to tell you when you're goofing up, when you're missing the mark. Somebody who's impartial, preferably outside of your church, would be great too. So they can also be a little bit more objective with you, and they don't have as much, stake in the game. They can be an outside voice. That's big. Someone who will nudge you to have both of these tracks to help you be building a youth ministry while you're also building your own skills as well. So yeah, learning on the job, there's a reason it's an expression, and it couldn't be more true than it is in youth ministry.
No, I totally agree. And I would even almost add to that and say that when you find a mentor, it would almost be worth finding a mentor that's in ministry and finding a mentor that's not in ministry. So you have the well-rounded outside approach of, hey, you're not only are you growing as a minister, not only are you growing as like someone that can evangelize and disciple students and disciple parents and everything like that, but you also have to grow as a person. And sometimes those worlds don't mix very well. Just like you said, sometimes we dive so hard into the student aspect of it that we forget that, like, hey, we have a person too. And I think it's super important.
And I'd go a step further, Brent, and I would say we oftentimes neglect our spiritual life too. Like we are so intent on helping kids grow that, at least for me in my first few years of youth ministry, I quickly became dry and empty, and the well that used to be full and vibrant and I'm going to get into youth ministry became, incredibly empty and barren. And so I would say your heart and your walk with Jesus is critically important throughout the journey. But there's a temptation early on in your youth ministry career to lean into the Bible knowledge that you already have, or maybe you graduated from seminary or whatever, and you're like, I've got a bunch, I'm fine. And we neglect those footsteps of Jesus and walking with him every day. And before you know it, your heart is dry, you're snapping back at people, you think you're the king of the world instead of serving the King of Kings, and it changes our heart and it messes with us. And so I would challenge people, especially in their first few years of youth ministry, man, you've got to make sure that you're walking with Jesus, or it's going to cost you a lot.
Well, and it definitely helps when like you said, the honeymoon phase, it helps when that dissolves, because then the real church world and real church ministry hits. And sometimes real church world and real church ministry is not very good.
Exactly.
And it can definitely catch you off guard. But so with that, how do you connect when you are new to the game? How do you connect with the church and the people around you when you are new to the city, the church, the area? Because the one thing that's interesting about youth ministry, especially when you move from like location to location, city, state, whatever, is you kind of feel like you're starting new again. And so this kind of new conversation in first few years kind of conversation comes up multiple times. So how do you connect with the church? How do you connect with the people around you when you're that new person?
Yeah, and I would say your first few years of youth ministry is definitely literally your first few years, like your first job, like, whoa, someone's paying me, or part-time or whatever, like, yay, I got it. I'm 22, yay. And I think it's also like, okay, I'm 29 and I'm at my new church. And I'm in my first few years again. Like technically, the pandemic has changed things a little bit, but I'm in the junior high ministry now. I'm on the third year. But like I'm a newbie at this church, and with the pandemic, it has changed I don't even know kids' faces, and I've seen them for 2 years. So the first few years stuff translates really well to both literally starting brand new and also starting at a new church. I think a bunch of the principles are super, super important. Is be careful of the first people that befriend you at a new church. Like sometimes they're awesome, well-meaning, and excellent people. And sometimes the first people that are like, yes, you're the new youth person, they have an axe to grind, or they're the reason that the previous person was let go. They're trying to get in good with you because they were in bad with the last one. So just be super cautious, have an open mind. I would say, man, there's never more chatter and talking in a church than in those first few years, where people are happy to give you information on other people. And I would say your first mission and if you're starting off new at a church, is a lot of coffee with a lot of people. Like hang out with people, get the lay of the land, get a bunch of different perspectives. I do think there's some work to do before you even end up at your church. Like there's some pre-work. Maybe that's a different, it's some subject for another time. But I think it's your first year is relationship building and fact finding. Like you're laying the foundation. You are investigating. You're not ready to build or change, or you got to just set a foundation, and a big part of that is the people. So I'd spend time with the leaders, every leader I'd get my hands on. I'd spend time with volunteers. I'd spend some time with key students, especially people that have a vested interest in youth ministry. Incoming parents, parents with like a junior high or soon to be junior high kid, I would want to spend time with them. If you can, I think it'd be interesting to spend time with former volunteers or the former youth worker. Like gather as much information as you can so that you can make a wise decision and build a strong foundation for the hopefully years or decades to come.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that comes in hand with the commitments very, very well, just for the nature of you have, man, we often use this expression when you go to conferences or stuff like that, but the first couple of years is definitely with everybody you interact with, everybody that wants to have like come into your office and talk. It's like drinking out of a fire hydrant, because there's so many people with so many different thoughts, with so many different things. And I love that you said the people that normally come up first are the ones that probably ran the last guy out.
I've just seen it too many times. It's just real talk.
It's 100% true. Man, I think we, like anybody listening to this, that you've had experience of at least being in one or two churches, you're like, yep, that was the person. Like, I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, that there are those people. But I think it's really, really important. And so this is not one of the questions that I kind of wanted to go in, or that I had planned to go into, but I think it's important. You might not have these directly in front of you, but I'm going to read them as far as the commitments go, because I think it's a great conversation to have with this conversation. And then I'll let you have your kind of input on each and every one of these as far as the conversation goes. So in that first 2 years of youth ministry book that Doug writes, he does top 10 youth ministry commitments. And it says, I will move slowly. I will regularly check my motives and evaluate my heart. I will steer clear of the numbers game. I will not criticize the past. I will avoid the comparison trap. I will focus on priorities. I will pace myself. I will serve. I will be a learner, which you've kind of already touched on. And then I will pursue contentment. So like, as far as those 10, like, I think they're really, really good, but what would you kind of add to those, I guess?
Yeah, I'll riff on a couple of them. Number 5, the comparison trap. I mean, social media has made comparison so easy. Easy for you to look like a zero and everyone else to look like a hero. And I'll say this, I've traveled the country. I've seen youth ministries that look incredibly good on Instagram. And it's just a really good social media influencer. It's not a great youth ministry. So be careful, because you're comparing everything you don't know about yourself to what you see on social media, or what you do know about yourself, your weaknesses, your failures, your flaws, your mistakes. And they're like, their youth ministry is perfect. Bro, if you came to my youth ministry, you would be underwhelmed. Like, we're just trying to do good youth ministry. But on Instagram, you're like, man, it looks amazing. Well, yeah, come out and see it, and maybe we can learn from each other. If you buy me lunch, I'm always down. But here's the deal. Comparison is too easy. And also, I think, I mean, what's that last commitment, right? Pursue contentment. I think that's a great one, because in that comparison gap, you're also like, I deserve better than that, or I should be at a bigger church or whatever. And even in my first youth ministry, it was before social media. That's how long I've been around. But you could still compare, and you compare numbers, which is another one of the commitments, right? At conferences or whatever. And now you compare social media, and you can get an ego. And there's nothing more destructive in the first few years of youth ministry, especially as you see God do some things. You're like, man, we baptized some kids. Kids are following Jesus. Like, this is happening. We got momentum. You can really quickly start to think it's about you. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And I would say pursuing contentment. And I read a book, it's out of print now, but it was by H.B. London, and it was called Bloom Where You're Planted. And that was a pivotal book for me to go, oh, hey, God put me here in the middle of this traditional church, in the middle of a cornfield, one corner, there's 100-year-old church, and that's where I'm planted. And that's where I'm going to serve. And maybe God will take you from that and do something, but until he makes that abundantly clear, serve right there. And so that was something I just didn't understand early in youth ministry. Man, be content, be excited, have a vision for where you are. Too many youth workers are already on to the next thing. They're planning their career moves. And I'm like, you're missing the ministry right in front of you. And so be careful of the alluring, shiny ministry that you think you're called to, and bloom where you're planted, and ask God to bless where you're at. I mean, I remember going to a conference one time, and I was like, we're going to take this home and we're going to like do this. And my wife is like, why don't we just come to this church? They seem to have it all together. And I'm like, no, we're going home. And God was very good to us after we learned this, the painful lesson, because we're always kind of like searching, and our ego can creep in so easily. And I'll tell you what, if there's one thing that irks me the worst right now, it's a lack of humility in youth ministry. Like, humbly serve where God has put you. And when I sniff out like arrogance or somebody's a tool, I just write them off, because I'm like, nope, that is the quickest way to submarine your youth ministry. Yeah. So I think on social media, just have a grain of salt or an asterisk by everything that you see, what I post included, because I know how to get the right angle to show the most kids possible in my youth group too. I know whatever, like in fact, I want my church to be smaller. Now, I don't want it to actually be smaller, but I want it to feel smaller, because I've served in a church that was really small. I grew up in a youth group of 12, so I'm stoked about small. But as a youth pastor, I don't like small. I want big. I want flashy lights. I want lasers. Let's go. But what I should want, yes, I want it all. But what I should want is a chance for this large group to be small, for hidden pains to come to the surface, for walls to be broken down. Like, instead, my goal can be fill up a room, take the right picture, do it again, top it next week. And that cycle is eventually, you can't keep outdoing yourself every week. You're going to burn out because you're doing youth ministry alone. And that pace is going to burn you out. And then you're doing it for a show instead of for the kingdom. So I would push really hard into those. I mean, those 10 commitments are terrific. If you haven't read the book, First 2 Years in Youth Ministry, it's awesome. Doug and I we just filled multiple whiteboards last week with revising this content, adding to it, filling it with stories of the last couple of years, and launching a new project. If you are interested, or your listeners are interested, you can go to firstfewyears.com, and it's first like with a one, like one ST, maybe put in the show notes or whatever. But the firstfewyears.com, we're launching a conference, a website, a podcast, even like this idea of coaching and mentors. We want to connect youth workers with people that have done this before, that are great at youth ministry and can be a sounding board or a coach as well. So we're trying to change the game for youth ministries. I think this is one of the projects that, Doug he literally wrote the book, but, he's also taught this at the Youth Specialties Convention for a long time. I remember one year Doug had something come up. I don't know if he got sick or had a kids' ball game or something, but he asked me to teach his First Few Years workshop. So I walk into this workshop and there's like 100 people, and and he's not there. So they've all come to hear Doug Fields, and in walks Josh Griffin. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I just have to tell you, I'm sorry. Like, Doug's not here. And we had the best 2 days. It was awesome. But he and I have taught this material over and over and over again. And it's time for us. I'm excited because we kind of want to have a legacy project where Doug's been doing youth ministry 40, 45 years. I'm coming up on 30. Like, we want to help the next generation of youth workers do great youth ministry. We want God's kingdom to move. And there is a system to help you succeed. And it's not a secret. It's absolutely accessible. And I feel like we've got the experience and some friends that'll help us create it and teach it. Firstfewyears.com is our newest gig, on top of Download Youth Ministry and YM University and all the other stuff we've got going. The National Day, trainmyvolunteers.com. We love helping youth workers. And I think our newest heart is literally what we're talking about today, is starting out right will change youth ministry as a whole. And if we can help a few hundred or a few thousand youth workers, that impacts tens of thousands or a million kids. I mean, potentially our goal is to change a generation. And so we think God is doing something here with this, and we're pretty excited about it. So it's fun to talk about it today because it's easy to remember all the mistakes I made and how it's a miracle I'm still in youth ministry to this day too.
Right. Yeah. I always talk with younger youth pastors. I'm always like, that I cannot recall the amount of times I called my first pastor apologizing to her for all the stupid things I did.
Exactly.
And it's just one of those things. It's like, you don't know, but what if we can change that? Like, and I love that mindset and that focus that you and Doug have, because I think it's very, very valuable. I think it's great information. And I think the first few years are, difficult for multiple reasons. The first few years, if you've been in youth ministry for a while, first few years are always difficult because you don't see the youth ministry like really clicking on all cylinders. Like if you're in the game for a while, that it takes average roughly 3 or 4 years before the ministry really, really kicks off and goes. And so those first couple of years of like trying and like getting all these things like foundation built and everything like that, you're like, man, I mean, is this working? Like, I don't know. And so like, just having that confirmation, having that, validation of like having a community of people that are all doing it together. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. We've got more ideas for how to deliver this. We don't have it all sorted out yet, but I think there's definitely gonna be a conference at our church in October, and it's going to be super limited. We're not going to have more than a couple hundred people there. Total access to the good, bad, and ugly of youth ministry and how to start right. But I think we'll probably do a limited podcast, and we'll introduce a few courses on ymuniversity.com. We just want to empower, we want to change the game. We want to change that number. So the next time Barna does research and they're like, how long does the youth pastor stay? I want that to be, man, the average stay went from 18 months to 5 years. Or
how great would that be?
Yeah, just let's elevate youth ministry together, and let's see if that's possible. I mean, one of the big mistakes that youth workers make early on in youth ministry too is they just do youth ministry alone. So one of his commitments in the book is like, I will pace myself, but usually, you know, you're running, expectations are high, honeymoon's over, and you've got to deliver on the numbers or the goals or whatever. And you're trying to do it all in your own power. And we have a limited power. So A, we need to make sure we rely on God's power. And B, I would say, God has given us great volunteers. And how do I recruit them, invite them, train them, you know, background check them, all that too? How do I keep them encouraged? How do I keep them engaged? Like, building a great team is one of the essential skills of a new youth worker.
Yeah.
And typically, not everybody, some people get it right out of the gate, but typically you do it all yourself. And that's a recipe for disaster as well. So we're also talking about, all right, what are the best practices, and what are the testimonies, and what are the ways that we can kind of help youth workers go from, I don't even know where to start, to I'm a professional team builder and I built an awesome team of volunteers, and God's using all of these gifts and talents and abilities and faith stories and backgrounds to do kingdom work in the youth group.
Yeah. And it's super important. But yeah, I would say that's the one time and time again that I have to jump back on. Because pace myself goes both ways. You can get really, really lackadaisical. And then you can also get really, really like, oh, everything has to be now kind of thing like that. And so you kind of have to find that sweet spot in the middle. And so pacing yourself goes both ways. I've met a lot of youth pastors that are just like, oh yeah, it's Wednesday night at 5:30. We start at 6. I don't have a lesson. Stuff like that. And like, I understand that weeks call for that. Like, maybe life happens, stuff like that. But like, when that's your regular routine, you need to pace yourself.
I will say this too, download youth ministry. You know, I could see when people are downloading stuff, and Wednesday as a whole is an unbelievable day. Our servers are like burning up because everyone's like, I need a game. And they're like grabbing stuff. It's so funny. Even Sunday mornings, which come on, that's too far. At least be Saturday night. Anyhow, Sunday mornings, it's burning as well. Maybe it's for Sunday night. I don't know. But there is a culture of like, I just need something. And I think, you know, that's one of the powerful moments of download youth ministry. Like, I need something for tonight. You can literally grab it. But if you're thoughtful and have a plan and a strategy, and we can help, like, Doug and I can teach that. And so it's starting to get really exciting to go, we've done this a long time. Like, we're two of the oldest people in youth ministry.
Yeah.
And there's this awesome new wave of youth workers coming in, especially post-pandemic. It's a whole new world we live in. There's a millennial wave coming in too. Like, we want to help them. And I think we can help them move really quickly into a place of health, which will translate to lasting in youth ministry longer, having more credibility with parents, longer tenures, a deeper impact on a community. Like, we want all of those things, but those things can't happen if you're leaving after 18 months. You know, if you go into your Google search history and you type in U-Haul and it's already there from the last time you searched it, that's a problem. You know, like, we want your cache to be cleared and a few years between Google searches for U-Haul rates, because you're moving on to the next church. Like, man, we want God to do a movement in our youth ministries, not just move people around the country to different churches. But if you don't get the first 2 years right, you never get that chance.
Yeah, man, that's good. That's real good. Well, so as we close, before we get into the connectional stuff of how they can connect with you and resources and stuff like that, any last minute, like, here's just a proverb of wisdom kind of things that you have to throw out?
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, for me, I would say I'll always be a learner. I think that was one of Doug's, we've touched on it a little, but podcasts like this, books, blog posts, resources, conferences. I'm going to a conference in a couple of weeks, and I get to be a conference speaker really often. And I'm not a speaker. I'm just going to go and soak it up because I want to be a learner. And so I would say, your walk with Jesus, number one, build a volunteer team, number two. And then I would say, man, be a learner and be hungry. We had these youth workers visit this weekend, and they were awesome. We had fun from a church in Arizona, rolled in to just see a service and whatever. We went out to lunch, their treat, because that's my policy. And we're sitting around the table, and they're like, what about this? And I saw your new students, and how do you follow up with kids? And I'm giving all these answers. And then they're like, well, okay, we got to go. We got to drive home. And I'm like, whoa, it's my turn to learn now. Hold on. And so I'm drilling them on like, what is God doing in their youth ministry that's special right now? Where is God moving? What are you doing that's like unique to your context that might not even translate to mine, but just blow my mind a little bit? Like, what are you doing that's different? What did you disagree with in our service? Like, what did you not do? Because you're like, we would never do that. And help me
That's
learn.
a good question. That's a
Yeah,
great
because
question.
I want to learn and grow. And so I think if you keep that humble attitude of like, make me better, make me better, make me better. Like,
Yeah.
I am a student. I've done this for a long time, and I am a student of youth ministry. And if you figure something out, I'm going to beg, borrow, and steal from you. I'm going to download everything I can from your website. I'm going to listen to your workshop, whatever, because I want to be better at and more effective. And so, in addition to those first two things, I'd say be a learner and stay hungry, no matter how long you've been in youth ministry.
Well, and that's the premise behind why we started this whole deal is we're like, it doesn't matter if you're year 1 or year 40. Like, we believe that everybody has a voice and we can learn from everybody. And so we've had a lot of people, because we've had people from towns of 2,000 on this podcast, and we've had people from huge churches, across the board, like all kinds of stuff. We've had huge names, little names that no one's ever heard of. But the premise is like, every single person has a voice. We all have something that we can learn from. And I joke all the time that my associate pastor is going to quit because like every time I record one of these, I'm like, so like, we need to talk about this. And I'm sure she rolls her eyes every time I get off of one of these recordings, because it's just one of those things. It's like every single time I'm done with one of these, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. And I love it. Like it gives me life. It gives me encouragement to push on in my ministry. It gives me encouragement to continue trying to bring other voices to light, because man, that's the beautiful thing about ministry is like, there isn't a cookie cutter, like this is how you do it manual. Like everybody has a unique twist. And we can learn things from ministry people. We can learn things from not ministry people. Like so many different aspects of this that like everybody has something to chime in on. So I love it. I love like just being a learner. Like that's been the biggest thing that's sparked out of this is like, I look forward to these interviews for me more than putting them out for other people to listen to or anything like that. It's absolutely amazing. I love it.
Awesome. Well, that's the best way to grow for sure is just continue to have the heart of a learner. And then, you know how it is, you go to a conference and you're like, the session was great, but I'm hanging with people between the sessions and I'm going out for meals. Those are where some of the magic really hits the road too. Yeah,
definitely. So as we continue, obviously you have tons of these because you do work for a resource group. But like, other than like what we've talked about in this conversation, do you have any other resources or books or anything to throw out that you'd want people to check out?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one would be go to firstfewyears.com. You'll hear about the conference that we're doing this October. If you're a newbie in youth ministry, come hang. We will have a blast together and talk shop. I think it will really, really be helpful to you. And then downloadyouthministry.com is the source to help you with the weekly pain of programming and creating. Somebody was telling me there was a social media question about wheels and doors and whatever. And I've seen it everywhere now. I'm like, oh my goodness, the dumbest question ever. Well, Download Youth Ministry already has a game for that to help you like be relevant and be on trend. So it helps with the fun stuff. Like I need a game for tonight or a video. It also can help with the serious stuff too. Like, man, I need a teaching and I don't know I need to teach a lesson on prayer and I don't know where to start. Well, there's tons of great resources on there. Yeah, I think as a new youth worker, we think we have to reinvent the wheel. So we're like, the church is paying me some amount of money, so I need to write my own message. Well, yeah, you should. And also start with this as a good starting point for you, or a launch pad, or I need to create the program or whatever. That's ridiculous. Like one of the things you learn really quick in youth ministry is that you don't need to be the creator of everything. You are the curator of everything. So yeah, grab this video and download this game and find these elements that you put together into a program, but you're a curator. Like there's never been a better time for youth ministry resources. And I hope, and I think Download Youth Ministry is probably, the best place to go to grab a bunch of those type of items. So that you can go spend time with students. You don't need to plan another program or design another service. That stuff is done. Just download it and go to that kid's baseball game and go to that, fine arts violin concert. Maybe the second half of that, because it sounds pretty rough, but you know what I mean? Like go visit kids in their home and do relational ministry and let the resources do the program work for you. So anyhow, you don't need to create anymore. There's tons of stuff out there. Yeah.
You don't have to recreate the wheel, but you do have to have intention on where that wheel goes.
So true.
So definitely, I love it. I've definitely used a bunch of resources and curriculum over my time. And what I always tell people is resources aren't a bad thing. Use them. But if you download it, don't even look at it, and then pull it up when you're about to start, you're not using it right. Because like they wrote it for their context and their ministry. It's not going to fit your cookie cutter. Like I said, there is no such thing as a cookie cutter program that fits everything. So you do need to read through it. You do need to make tweaks and edits, but like you don't have to write it from scratch. You don't have to reinvent the wheel because the wheel's already been made.
You got it. Yeah, edit it for your context and make it better, make it your own. Absolutely. But so many, like 90% of the work has been done. I agree. And games, there have been times where I've taken the stage on a game and never opened it before. That's not what I recommend either, but some of the games are so easy and so turnkey, they're literally ready to go. But even those, I'd say put in a minute of time, it's going to pay off when you're on stage too. Yeah,
just review it real quick, move it up, like check it out, make sure you know what's coming, because the last thing you want to do is be caught off guard from what you didn't know was there.
You got it.
So finally, how can people connect with you? I mean, obviously Download Youth Ministry, but if they want to follow you on social media or reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I post a ton of stuff on Instagram. So I'd say my Instagram stories are probably where most of my youth ministry content goes. Everything that I feel like is valuable, like you can see what my summer calendar looks like. I'll put that out in a couple of weeks. I'm always trying to share tips and tricks on my Instagram. It's at Joshua Griffin. Same on Twitter, a little less frequent there. Instagram is probably my go-to right now. And then, downloadyouthministry.com is my home. And check it out. And honestly, if you're a youth worker and you've created great stuff, everything on DYM is made by youth workers for youth workers. So put something up on DYM. If you made a great series or a hilarious game, put it up. Every time it sells, you get 50% too, or up to 50%. So you can make some little side hustle money and do kingdom work at the same time. So if you have invented the wheel, put the wheel up on DYM.
There you go. You've heard it from one of the goats himself. So
You're too kind, dude. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to hang out more, and hopefully maybe you get out here soon and we can talk shop together in person. That'd be a lot of fun.
that would be amazing, man. But as that does kind of conclude what we have. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate your heart for ministry. I appreciate all the years that you've put in. And I love that you, along with Doug and others, are just trying to set the new standard of, hey, this isn't a short position. This isn't a like we've said the whole time. This isn't a month, like an 18-month gig. This is like, I chose to serve in youth ministry for life. I chose, like, God appointed me to be a pastor of students, and that's what I'm going to do. And I applaud you for it. I love your heart, love your passion for students. And thank you for all that you do for student leaders across the world, man. You are awesome.
That means the world to me. Thanks for your time. And I appreciate the chance just to hang out and get to know you a little more too, and talk shop. It's my favorite thing.
All right. Well, that does conclude. So we will see you guys later. We appreciate y'all checking this episode out. Be sure to go to our website for the show notes. It'll have all the links to what Josh talked about, firstfewyears.com, all the Download Youth Ministry stuff, and all of his socials. Check all that out. Go support what they're doing, especially if you're first years. If you are new to the game, it's crucial. Go check it out. And if you can't make the conference, at least go pick up the book, which will also be in the show notes for this episode. But until next time, we will see y'all later. Peace.